you wish to explore that's holding you back?
I looked up the history of invention, and I'm able to read between the lines. Now, if you want to know where ideas come from, they don't come from the mind of man. And nobody ever really, man cannot think or reason. Now that sounds strange because everybody is brought up to believe we can think or reason. So I had the assistant to the dean of Princeton came to some of my seminars, and he said, would you mind coming to Princeton and talking about the way you think? I said, they won't listen to me, I have no credentials. He says, I'm in second to the dean, I'll make him listen to you. And he just like the class. Right. You understand?
Yeah.
Once the guy comes in and says, listen to this guy, then ask questions. So he's a man from the optics department said to me before I said one word at Princeton. The name of the subject was Man Can Think or Reason. This applies to me too also.
Right.
So I always say that.
I
I'm not a
understand.
part of that. So they said to me, I take issue with you. I believe man can think or reason. So give me one example of man thinking. Anything. The guy says, there's thousands of examples. I said, I can't answer that. Pick one. Well, somebody had to invent the camera. This is what he said in his words. A man thought of the camera. I said, did you know that 1,000 years ago in the Holy Land, they made houses out of mud? Because they didn't have glass windows. They made a little hole in the mud so you can see whether it's daylight. Once you make a little hole in the black dome, people walking on the outside appeared on the wall upside down. That's where the pinhole camera came from. He says, a man can't think where the camera came from. So I showed him that. Then he got mad at me. He said, what about the movie camera? I said, I can't answer all those questions. Do you have the time? He said, I got all the time in the world. I said, are the rest of you interested? They said, yes. So I said, all right, nobody invented a movie camera. The Chinese used to cut a girl out of paper with hands up in the air like this. Little girl. They put it on a desk, put a candle here. As the candle flickered, the shadow moved. Nobody sat down and invented a movie camera. Nobody ever sat down and invented a wheel. They tell you in school that the wheel was beginning of the age of technology. A tree fell over another tree. When you pulled it, the bottom would roll. That suggested the wheel. But if there's one stone in the way, anywhere along that log, it won't roll. So they shaved the bark off. Took years. And when they made it thinner in the middle, the two ends would be larger. That's where the wheel came from. But man cannot sit down and say, I gotta make a wheel. The brain, that can't work that way. They have to see something. So when people go to a movie and they see a Martian, you'll notice that the Martian has a grasshopper's head and crab's claws. Every imagination is made up of known elements. If you ask a creative person, how do you create? He says, I don't know, it just kind of comes to me naturally. He doesn't know. Well, see, when did you learn to speak? July 7th, Saturday morning. First it was da da ba ba, then mama, papa, light, glass, your mother, over and over again until language evolved. Now man never invented language either. To invent language you'd have to have language. So you can't. So when you saw a lion you said, oh, oh, and the guy, oh, oh, you said, yeah. So that became the name of a lion in the given country. And when you ate something good, you went, The beans don't eat it. First there was symbols, and then after years of the sounds you made in relation to your environment became the language. But nobody ever invented language. Now they say, well, Tesla invented the wireless. How did he do that? Well, when you bought electric wire, they used to shove it in the bag, all mixed up, and it took you time to straighten out. After years, they wrapped it around a cardboard spool, electric wire. But sometimes the wire was broken in the middle, so you connect two clips to the wire and ran a current through it, and you moved the galvanometer. Now, if there happened to be a coil nearby, just nearby, it induced a current. That induced a current. That's what Tesla got the wireless. They say Edison invented the electric light. Not true. Nobody invented anything, ever. What Edison did, he was running different currents through different types of wires. He didn't know which would conduct with less loss. He didn't know. So he ran current through copper, whatever he had. And when he ran a current to a certain mixture of metal, it would glow red hot. So he bent it like a letter U to put all the light in one area. And it fell over and burned papers on his desk. So he put a glass over it. And that's where it came from. Nobody said, I've got to make electric light. The brain can't do that, yes.
Did you have a question on creativity?
Yes. This comes from my field. You've already slated my field, which is good.
Which is?
Musicology. Do you think music is an unnecessary activity and in the future will gradually be wiped out?
Do you think music is an unnecessary activity in the future would
Yes.
be wiped out?
That's a quick answer.
If a man came from Mars and he had a pointed head, most women, because that's the way they're brought up. But if everybody in America had a horn sticking forward, or a nose 1 foot long, you'd have surgery done to make your nose longer. There's no such thing as beauty. All that's bullshit. Everything you learn in school is lies, or man's projection. They say animals have horns to defend themselves. So I said, where's the horns on a rabbit? You can sure use them. Animals don't have horns that stick forward. Some stick back, some go out to the side, some spiral down and around. If you're born with horns, you learn how to use them. If you were born with a solid bony growth here, and they locked you in a closet, you'd use that to get out. If a man came at you, you use that shoulder. So if you were born with a pointy head, you'd be a good swimmer. If it was pointy, real sharp.
What did you do to your dogs?
What's that?
In the 50s, was it, or 60s? What did you do to your dogs?
So what did you do to your dogs in the 50s
With
or
the
60s?
horns.
You strapped the
I
horns?
used to raise police dogs to lead the blind. And I used to put horns, snap horns on a police dog. That went forward. Some horns came down like that, some out to the side, some in the back. It took a month for the dog to learn to use those horns. Animals are born with horns, but they don't always face the front. They twist. You know what I mean? They're not always. And they say, well, what about nature? Isn't nature harmonious? No. Every big fish is eating every little fish. And every organ of the human body is fighting invading bacteria constantly. And I got all these ideas from the human body. If the brain says, I do all the thinking, I want all the nutrients. The lungs would say, if I don't put oxygen in the blood, you die as a brain. So the brain says, what do you need? Everything you need. And the liver says, if I don't filter the blood, the brain and the lungs would die. So what do you need? Everything you need. So every organ of the human body gets whatever it needs, otherwise you die.
Jacques, do you want to expand on music anymore?
Yes, if a man came from Mars and he said to me, what's that on your wrist? I says, I can't keep good record of time. This is better. If I have an appointment at 4 o'clock, it's better than I am at judging when 4 o'clock comes around. Then he says, what's those things hanging from your wife's ear? I said, that's a nothing thing. It does nothing. It's an ornament. But in the future, it'll have a chip in it. And if she's in an auto accident, they wheel her in a hospital, that chip will make all her records come forth. Then it's something. But music is nothing until it's used in a motion picture to emphasize emotions, or if it's used to help people understand things. A movie, a guy sticks a radio against it, they're walking down the street listening to music, is listening to nothing. An Afro-American that weaves the hair of the children is doing nothing. It's a nothing thing. And you have to learn what a nothing thing is and a something thing. Something thing is something that works for people.
So do you feel music in the future could be used for functional things? So for,
Yeah.
like for example, like you were saying,
Therapy.
for
No, they
adding
will
expression
study-
to a movie.
They
Or,
won't have music in the future, but they will have acoustical engineers who study the effects of sound on the human body and learn how to mix sounds together to cause you to relax, go to sleep, or wake up. But music will have to be a prime effector, has to have the same effect on everybody. But if you ask a musician who's professional, what is music? She says, I don't know. I asked hundreds of musicians, what is music? Finally, I got an answer from one who was an instructor in music. He said, music is a series of sounds so arranged as to produce a pleasing effect. So I said, do you like hard rock? He said, no. And you're wrong.
subjective.
It's a way of manipulating people.
And if you ask a normal person, normal means fucked up by society. If a normal person, what is creativity? Because I don't know, the ideas just come to me. You'll find out it's always the same. Now here's what it is, you make a note so you know what creativity is. You may not remember what I say. Creativity is taking known elements and putting them together in unique ways.
Where does the unique come from? The unique ways part.
Where is what?
The unique come from.
Where does the unique ways come from? How can you put them together in unique ways?
No. You see a lion, you don't know what it is, you walk over and it tears you to pieces. Another guy says, don't go near that type animal. The animal you go to is a sheep or a beaver or whatever. The first man gets hurt. He climbs up a tree and his balls get caught in the branches and he makes a jock strap. You know what I mean? But first there has to be a problem before man can think his way out of it. Man never says what makes war. You control the earth's resources, the water, the arable land, and he doesn't have anything. He's going to arm against you. And all crime is made by this culture. All criminal behavior. Serial killers are made, but you don't know how. So that's why I use Albert Fish. Albert Fish, they believe he ate 40 children. But he had a lot of surplus meat, so he sold it to local butcher shops. Human beings. So people were eating human beings. And this guy said, don't kill Albert Fish. If you catch him, I would like to try to find out what made him that way. His name was Dr. Wortham, a psychiatrist. One of them only said that. And he said, I don't know what made him that way. And here's what made him that way. When he was 7 years old, he was touching his private parts. All kids touch their nose, their head, everything. But they don't think of sex. You understand?
So, yeah.
And so his mother was an old-time Baptist. She said, you're going to burn in hell touching that part of your body. You will burn eternally. Scared the hell out of the kid. So the mother said at 2 in the morning, he was screaming. She went into the bedroom, he stuck needles into his genitals because he didn't want to go to hell. Then he used to try to get minority kids, Mexicans and blacks, in the woods and cut their genitals off to save them from hell. That's the kind of environment he was brought up in. There's no bad people, no good people, they're just different kinds of people. So when I trained the dogs to lead the blind, a sweet old lady, 74, would walk over and say, what a nice dog. I said, no, I could have trained that dog to tear soldiers to pieces or lead the blind. There are no good dogs or bad dogs, nor are there good people or bad people. The people that come from the South will say, I'm going to get me a nigger and kick his ass. He gets that from the environment he lives in. If you lived in the South, you'd speak just like a Southerner. If you're brought up in Germany, you speak with a German American accent, depending on where you're at.
You're talking about the mechanistic conception of life?
Yes,
You're talking about the mechanistic conception of life?
yes.
In which there's no purpose to life, as some people think.
No.
If there's no purpose to life, what's the point in the Venus Project?
To give life more meaning. Right now, we say, when you meet normal children, all children are alike, by the way, say, I can run faster than you, I bet I can fight you. They always say the same thing. But if they're brought up in the Venus Project, they don't talk that way anymore. All children are brought up to understand how to relate to one another, how to relate to nature, how nature affects us, how sunlight, floods, all things affect human behavior. So they don't behave as our kids behave today. So I wanted to know what makes a creative person. And I said I didn't know, so I got a book out of the library on the Wright brothers, because I did ask my parents, how can airplanes fly on this thin substance? They said, we don't know. So that's why I went to the library. And I got the book out, and I was trembling, because I wanted to know the answer to that for years. And when I opened the book, it starts out, it was a sunny day in May, and Mrs. Orville Wright was hanging clothing on the line. I really didn't care about that. I wanted to know how planes fly. And I had to plow through that whole damn book of Sunny Day in May. Near the end of the book, they killed the pigeon and the wings dropped. So they stuck a coat hanger wire through the wings and moved the wings forward and backward and glided the pigeon. That was information. Now I read another book where it says, this doctor made a contribution to cancer. Well, I'd like to know what it is. So I get the book. It starts out, he lives in New Jersey. I didn't give a shit about that. He has 3 children, Betty, Barbara, and Luke. I didn't want to know that. I just want to know where it comes. There's so much information today, I can't afford Sunny Day in May. Now, if you want to talk about the doctor, talk about the end of the article, after you tell me what he did. Because there's so much information coming at it today, we don't have time for Sunny Day in May. So I began to get books together and scratch all the Sunny Day in May in the book. And maybe of 100 pages, there were 2 pages with information. And writers got paid by the amount of words they use. So there's a lot of bullshit in 90% of the books. You have to plow through that to get information.
Zach, I mean, to that question about what's the purpose of the Venus Project, I've heard him answer in this way before, that he can go out and get hit by a Mack truck. This mechanism can go out and get splattered by a Mack truck. That he can die of pollution from cigarettes and from exhaust in the air, and people can break into his house. So it's more beneficial for everyone to live in abundance and scarcity.
I agree, but
Venus Project has no elitism.
And he's talking about what's the purpose of the Venus Project if there's no purpose.
One of the things I was going to say was
to make life better for all the world's people.
Wouldn't it be better just to end the human race if there's no purpose to life?
Yeah, you can do that. Some people might.
People have tried.
Atomic experiments.
It's a very hypothetical question.
Scientists.
Here's the thing. What's the purpose to a dog's life?
Well, there's no purpose.
Right. So kill a dog. Why don't you do that? Because it's not within your value system to do so. Why not? Because your cultural upbringing and your family upbringing, etc., has taught you to value life, etc., etc. Well, there's a lot of damage out there. There's a lot of suffering all over the world, and in other countries, a lot worse than what we've got it here.
I agree with you.
And anything that you can do to alleviate that has got to be a positive thing for everyone. So and like Zach says, the more your kids are educated, the more it benefits you, the more it benefits.
If you take a totally mechanistic perspective, there should be no benefits to either.
Husbands and wives will be married, but they won't argue with each other. Children will never get in fights in the new society.
Jacques, he's talking about if you really take it as a pure mechanistic point of view, there should be no value to either killing people or living.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. But the other way is, the smarter your kids are, the richer my life. The more people working on cancer and heart disease, the less pain in my life. So every kid that can't afford to go to medical school is a loss to the nations of the world. So we educate everybody, and we do away with the money system. If you use money, if I put up $500,000 to get you elected, you owe me a favor, brother. And don't forget that. So money corrupts, always.
You do care about people. You do care about society.
Not in the sense that you do. But the more people that are better educated, the richer my life. And I depend on Newton, Louis Pasteur. Maybe I'm alive because of Louis Pasteur. So my grandfather told me that people came from all over the world and they brought the printing press, language, religion, and the Frenchman, Louis Pasteur, gave us inoculation against certain diseases. He said, we owe so much to so many different countries, don't ever pledge allegiance to any one country. And I like that, so I refused to pledge allegiance to the flag. The teacher didn't ask me why. She grabbed me by the ear right to the principal's office. And the principal said to the teacher, you're excused. When she walked out, he put his arm around me. He said, why don't you want to pledge allegiance? Everybody does. I said, everybody once believed the earth was flat. That doesn't make it flat. So I said, what do you think of American history? I said, sir, can I be ruthlessly frank with you? He says, of course. That's strictly bullshit. American history, everybody says the right thing. Everybody does the right thing. When you look up medical research, you find Dr. Ehrlich had to go through 606 experiments to find the answer. That the politicians always say the right thing. They don't look real. They look like they're made of plastic. So I said, what do you think of our teaching? That's terrible. So he said, what's the matter with it? I said, my teacher said, you don't spell cat with a K. That's not what I told you. I said, those words don't tell me anything. If the teacher says, that's wrong, that doesn't tell me anything. He said, we use a C instead of a K, that tells me something. So I was telling him that. So he said, Jack, I'm going to have to call your mother in. I said, you do whatever you have to do. So my mother comes in crying. She said, what did he do? She said, he didn't do anything, but we have no place for him in the school. So she said, oh my God, what's going to happen to him? So he said, don't worry, I'm going to take him to a bookstore and buy him the books he wants to read. Rope off the back of the class, but I want him to report to me once a week and tell me why he's reading that book. The principal was an interesting guy. So he did that, and I got beaten up by the normal kids for that privilege. I didn't ask for it, he just superimposed it on me. That went on for 1.5 years, and then he died of a heart attack, and they took that privilege away. So I played hooky. I left home with books, but went to the library and read what I wanted to read. The school books were awful. They were Dickie Dare and his sheep, on the way he met a cow. Moo moo. And Cinderella touched a rat and it turns into a white horse. You bring up kids with that kind of crap and you expect them to think later on. So I didn't like school, and all the kids always said the same thing. I bet I can hit a ball more times than you can. I bet I can run fast. Always the same. There was no creativity, no originality, and the teachers went by a book. They couldn't use their own, they didn't even have their own message.
Still do nicely.
Yeah, I think it's even worse today.
Thank you.
In the area of artificial intelligence, of robotics, is the area in which I work. We're finding that more intelligent machines need to be emergent, not programmed, generative, non-algorithmic, and
Yes.
interact with their environment.
Right now they're programmed, but in the future cars will have proximity mechanisms and it'll send out radar to your car and back and keep 40 feet away. The brakes will go on. So he got mad at me, you couldn't even drive your car into my car.
Do you think that non-programmed machines might cause a problem in the future? I'm not talking about fear of robots, overthrow of society, but is this something that scientists will need to balance? The idea of machines programming themselves?
Yes, I believe they will. But they don't really program themselves. They send a sensor into the soil, and they say the soil is depleted in iron by sensors. And the machine will just tell you, but machines do not feel. They will not take over, like Hollywood says. Hollywood always shows the guy inventing the machine choking the guy and taking over. Machines do not have feelings. They cannot have feelings. They have to be made of flesh and blood to feel. So a machine, if you run your desktop night and day, Saturday and Sunday, it never says, God damn it, give me a day off, will you? It doesn't care.
The systems I'm seeing more and more having inbuilt generative pain and pleasure systems, and they generate over time according to these pain and pleasure principles. And we're seeing that these kind of systems are more intelligent than your regular algorithmic, deterministic computer
Well, let's
systems.
say that the machines are becoming more sensitive to the environment. Like when a pilot flies a plane, it tells him there's a storm ahead, fly over it 30,000 feet or whatever. He can't do that. When I was a kid, the guy would look out of an airplane and says, I'm about a mile high. Today radar hits the ground, comes back and says you're 5,300 feet, 6 inches off the ground. No man can do that. So all military planes are equipped with that. Military planes today can fly 2,000 miles an hour. You can't see an enemy coming, so they have a scope with radar, which goes 50 miles or 100 miles out and comes back and tells you where the enemy is going to be. A little spot shows up. When a spot shows up, if you press the machine gun, no bullets come out unless that plane is within the cone of fire. That's extrasensory devices put in airplanes, because the pilot can't tell whether it's within the cone of fire. So the pilot's decision making is being eliminated. When you go to, when my grandmother went to a butcher shop, the butcher would grab a chicken, say it's about 10 pounds. The person buying it says it looks like 7 pounds, and the scale wiped that out. They put it on the scale, and you know what? Machines will not take over, but they will replace human insufficiency.
Machines could become more intelligent than people.
By far, easily.
What do you mean that you're programming pain and pleasure in the computers?
We're seeing that the kind of machines we have today are very deterministic, and to create an emergent machine, we need to create a reward and an associative system built
Can't
into
do
the
that.
machine.
They're doing that already.
These
They
are the
they
kind of
working on
things
those
that we're working on.
You can make a machine that looks like a person, and you can tell them your brother was killed in an accident, and the eyebrows will move at the right angle, saying, I'm so sorry to hear that, but it will not feel anything.
But isn't the human just a machine?
Go on.
Isn't the human brain just a machine?
No, he's a chemical, biological type. And if you make a biological machine, you can give it emotions. But if you don't, if it's mechanical and electrical, it'll never feel bad or good. When a machine does a good job of turning out an automobile, it doesn't feel good. You know what I
One
mean?
of the things they're working on, 'cause I've watched some of those documentaries, and stuff, one of the things they're actually working on is within the if you like, the base program of these new AI machines. What they do is they give it a series of like the parts that would make up basically a reward system. So, for example, if the machine done a certain act, it would get an artificial reward for that. So therefore, it would do that thing again. If it done something that it was deemed that was wrong, it would get
It depends
would
on
get
your
a
programming.
punishment for it, and it would feel
It
that it
depends on
didn't
your
not do it now.
programming. If you program it not to kill guys in American uniform, only Chinese uniform, the machine might do that. But the machine would have to have sensors to do anything you wanted to do.
I think the key issue really with it is motivation.
But the machine will never feel good about what it does.
If a machine, if you get to a point where the AI is so intelligent and that it's got a reward or punishment based system applied to it, and that's fully automated, you have no programming control over that. It would have to have a motive to do something detrimental to human beings.
The trouble is we're seeing.
To human beings.
The trouble is we're seeing that if you restrict the amount of motive that these machines have,
Now,
and
you
you
can
restrict
get a
the
machine-
intelligence, so there's motivation
You
for
can get a
people.
machine to say, I'm sorry to hear that, I hope you have a nice trip, but it will not feel anything.
Okay.
They're programming reward into it.
What?
They said they're programming reward into the artificial
You can't do
intelligence.
that. You can't make a machine feel good. They don't even know what it is. See, you have a stomach, you get hungry, And if a pig goes by, it smells good. And so you kill it and you eat it. And when you eat it, your stomach is full. And the sensory mechanisms go to the brain. Let me put it your way. Television is going to be 3D without glasses. Frank Sinatra's dead, maybe 40 years. He still sings all over the world on television. He's a small screen. The future, he'll be full size. The only thing the matter with it is you can put your hand through it. And they don't like that. So the next thing is teletactile, where you can shake hands with Frank Sinatra and feel the warmth of his hand. You don't have any idea how that'll work, right?
Not
Here's
right
how
now.
it works. If you take your finger and stick it in the hot water, the nerve endings transmit a certain signal to the brain, let's say 8,000 cycles per second. If you could make a recording of exactly that, you stick your finger in the cold water, the same nerves transmit a different signal to the brain. If you make a recording of that, play it into the finger, you can play hot water or cold water. Your tongue has little crevices shaped like the letter V. When you eat bacon and eggs, it falls in there, and the nerve on the bottom is titillated by the bacon and eggs. If you make a recording of that and play it into the tongue, you can play bacon and eggs or whatever flavor you want. So teletactile is the next 3D without glasses, then teletactile. Now that means that women today live longer than men. So if your husband died, say, 15 years ago, if you took movies of him getting up, turning around, sitting down, and his value system, you can make a full-size person and you can go for a walk with him, even though he died 20 years ago. And you couldn't tell the difference when you touch him. When you touch a balloon, it yields. When you touch glass, it doesn't yield. But the same nerve endings can touch a balloon, or a blind male can touch a comb and tell you it's a comb very fast. A normal person, when blindfolded, has to run his finger over the scissors quite a while before it's a scissors. You understand? When a blind man dreams, the fingers move. When a normal person dreams, it doesn't. So there are differences in structure and function. Knowing those differences, you don't look at a human being as good or bad. A serial killer is a person brought up in an environment that reinforced serial killing. He's not bad or good. Now what we will do, meaning those people that accept the Venus Project, is make a gadget that looks like this, only it generates sound for the blind people. And they can hear an open door by feedback instead of walking with a white stick. And if there's a table in the way, they can hear the chair like a bat. A bat can fly, has terrible eyesight, and avoid insects, wires, everything. A bat can fly around by acoustical feedback. So we will make, for all blind people, free of charge, an acoustical feedback while we work on the eyes. We don't dig up nickels and dimes to help support a poor country. We grow surplus food, store it in the north and polar regions, hermetically sealed. So in case of emergency, there's a special contingencies department that has the right to act. And they can get that food and get it to the land without going through Congress and bullshit, debate, and all that crap. Gone forever. We won't even make the history books of the future. We're so stupid and backward. Everything we think of is bullshit. The universities are better equipped than ever today. They have the best microscopes, everything. And the wars are getting worse. The nerve gas is getting more penetrating. It makes you take the mask off. And so, what good is science? Science working for commercial corporations is not science. It's prostitution of science. So in the future, today there's no such thing as a scientist, because they'll say, what makes war? What makes a criminal? They get out of their field. Today they're in chemistry, mathematics, structural engineering, but they have no overview. Scientists are just as dumb as normal people. They have no meaning today.
Can I just say something on the AI thing? One of the things that Jack talks about in with city design, etc., is the efficiency of cities compared with like current cities. But there's a point where efficiency becomes inefficient, if you take something, if you take for example a railway system, and it's running at an 80% efficiency of getting people to work on time or whatever, and it's 75% efficiency in its electrical use, etc., etc. The amount of man hours and the amount of design to go into improving it another 10% in all of those areas might be so high that it's actually inefficient to do it. So, for example, it might cost you only 1,000 man hours of design and actual implementation of the systems to improve it 5%, but it might take you 100 times that amount to improve it another 5%. So there's a point where you get to a peak of the efficiency where it's not worth taking it any further. You're actually becoming inefficient. I think with the thing with AI is you've got to get we'll get to a point where where we realise that do we take it any further? Do you get it to a certain point where it's benefiting people to a peak where we don't need to take it any further than that, where we don't need to give it feelings, to make it more than human, do you know what I mean? In the sense of like feelings and stuff like that, that we might not need to take it that far in order to benefit people.
Can I ask a straightforward question?
Good answer.
Do you aim for 100% automation in the future? Is that?
I don't know whether we'll make the future. We may kill each other. I can't tell you that. Because I'm not in control. I can't even get on NBC because it's owned by General Electric and they wouldn't like my views. See, so, like I said before, the lawnmower people would like to sell a lawnmower to every goddamn home instead of 3 giant lawnmowers that take care of the area. But what do people really want? They want grass that doesn't grow any taller than 1.25 inches. So you don't need lawnmowers. Don't ask people what they want. Tell them what they ought to want. But that's a tough job because they look at it as a dictatorship.
Is that one of the hardest things to communicate to people, that they should be told what they need?
Not for me. For normal people it is, because they argue with logic and reason. It doesn't work. If you use reason with the Ku Klux Klan, it doesn't work. Like if a Jew went to a Nazi meeting and tried to raise money for B'nai B'rith, they'd never do it. If educated black people went to a Ku Klux Klan meeting to share ideas, they couldn't, no matter what they said. So there's no such thing as communication, not yet, because the Democrats can't communicate with the Republicans. Watch TV. You don't need to take my word for it. You'll find that husbands and wives, in most instances, cannot communicate. And children and parents can't. They argue. In the future, children will be brought up to know where a person's coming from. So when I was a kid, I wanted to know, is man's behavior toward a female natural or learned? I said, I don't know. So I went to the South Pacific Islands. This was a long time ago, like almost 65 years ago. And I got to the island of Tuamotu. When I arrived, I brought mirrors and beads, which I was going to give to the natives, to tell them that I didn't come to take anything away from you. I come to give you this. But they were already in my hut. They opened my suitcase and were giving one another my mirrors and beads. And being semi-normal, meaning fucked up, I said, what's going on? They said, you have too many. I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't. And 3 days later, when the old folks pulled in the fishing net full of fish, they threw fish to anybody standing there. They didn't care who you were, and didn't say you owe me $5, you owe me $10, nothing like that. But the thing that bothered me is nobody wore clothing. Everybody was naked. And the missionaries came when I was there and put T-shirts on the girls. Said, you come to church, you have to wear a T-shirt. So the girls wore a T-shirt, but they cut 2 holes in it. Because they were uncomfortable. They didn't know why. It's like me covering your nose when you go outside. You know what I mean? So if boys and girls go swimming nude when they're this big, there's no peeping toms on the island. There are no fetishes. all men try to get in a girl's blouse, like that. And she said, no. And so, in the islands, they don't have that. They don't stroke the whole female. Me like you. You stroke a dog, you stroke the whole dog. You don't stop at the ears or the balls. You stroke the whole dog. But in this culture, guys say, hey, get a load of that. That's all learned by movies, books, and it's not normal or natural. In the future, people get laid when they're of age. They get laid. We don't have to seduce a girl. You have to say you're cute looking. There's no such thing as beauty. You can raise a kid to go for people with big ears or anything. It depends on your techniques. Yes.
The scientific method requires a certain determinism.
Yes.
Does that assume that the universe is finite? And if the universe is infinite, what does the Venus Project say about unknown or random or infinite values?
It says that if you go to a planet with 9 times the gravity of the Earth, your bridges have to be thicker metal, etc. And your airplanes have to have bigger wings, lighter weight, and more horsepower. It'll tell you what you need for different areas, but it won't tell you technology is static. The way we figure things out here in this country has to do with the force of gravity, the amount of light, all kinds of things. So there's no truth, no such thing as truth. And we cannot perceive the world as it is. A doctor came to one of my sessions and he started to tell me, we have eyes to see with, ears to hear with, tongue to taste with. I said, so you really believe you have eyes to see with? He said, absolutely. So I took him in a dark room and said, see. He says, I can't unless you turn the lights on. Then you can't see with your eyes. Everything you learn in school is strictly bullshit. Almost everything. So you're made to fit in with this culture.